Okay, welcome to the City Council meeting for Monday, March 13th, 2023. And members of the public are encouraged to participate in the meetings. You can access our website. You can provide written comment at the same website, or you can participate by phone, or you can participate here in person. With that, we'll call the meeting to order, and would you please rise for the flag salute, and we'll have Councilmember Bessinger lead us in the flag salute. Thank you, Councilman Bessinger. We can have roll call by our clerk, Carrie Cha.
Councilmember Baskel.
Here.
Councilmember Bessinger.
Here.
Councilmember Monutoa.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce. Here. And Mayor Ashbeck is absent.
This time we will have public comments. If you are here to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda, we will not be able to take any action on it, but we will be happy to hear what you have to say. If you could please state your name and give your address for the record, and if you can push that little speaking button so that it goes on. Okay, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Crystal Reed. I am a lifelong Clovis resident and a small business owner within Old Town Clovis. I have a big issue with Councilwoman Diane Pierce today. I am very upset at her actions of racism and being an elected official within Clovis. I was raised and lived in Clovis my whole life. I remember the racist past our Clovis has had. And we have taken over the past 20 plus years to overcome that racist past. And as a businesswoman who relies on all walks of life, because I own a property management business from low income to your mansions, I rely on fair housing and economic development of lower incomes. Right now, with the actions of Councilman Pierce, she's basically putting out there, taking money out of my clients' pockets. Clovis does not need that kind of leadership of the negativity that is coming out of this woman's mouth. We did not elect a woman that wants to express her negative views on racism. It is to my understanding that she was offered an opportunity to go and get training by the League of California Cities, and she did not participate in this training. I think that would help her with her comments. And her reasoning for her not to be able to go, she just didn't have the time. I've also noticed that she has been missing council meetings, and she's just been in council and elected in the past few months. I feel that she is taking away from our pocketbooks and in displaying, and when it comes to people coming and investing, because I work with a lot of investors, that I do not need this kind of negative aspect. What I am referring to is that at the honoring the African American history, which is a big triumph for Clovis, huge triumph for Clovis. The CEO of the museum said that Clovis had such a racist past. And then she makes a statement that she doesn't like the term equality, that it's socialism. That is unacceptable. We have tried to make sure Clovis is equal, to make everybody feel welcome here. And if with her only living here in the past 4 years, that's it, 4 years as a resident. She has blown up what Clovis has worked so hard for in the past 25 years. Thank you for your time. Councilwoman, I'm coming for you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed, for your comments. You know, out of courtesy for Councilmember Pierce, I know we will not address any of the issues, but some of the facts, Ms. Pierce, if you wanted to respond.
Yeah, my comments, I commended the African American Museum on their 30-year anniversary. I said it was absolutely fantastic to be able to recognize that. And the word I took issue with was not equality, it was equity, and that's an entirely different thing. But I appreciate you coming here to share your opinion.
Equity and equality are the same thing.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else here to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Yes, go ahead. And if you could state your name and give your address for the record.
Is it already on?
Yeah, it's already on. Yes.
All right. My name is David Avakian, or David Meyer Avakian. I live at 88 Tammy Court. And I just came here to talk about how I think hens are important for Clovis and why I think it's kind of going back to our path of life in Clovis. I know in Old Town Clovis we say the way of life of Clovis citizens, so I'd like to, if we could, get back to that. So I'd like to describe a little bit of why I think hens would improve Clovis, and then also at the end of that show you guys, I know we handed out the proposal earlier, and tell you guys what those pages are about. So why I think hens would improve Clovis: not only would Clovis citizens receive better quality food, less bugs, less waste, and less weeds, but it also increased Clovis's tax revenue directly through their sales taxes due to hen owners buying coops, feed, grit rocks for digestion, waterers, straw for bedding, and of course the hens themselves. This alone would help Clovis, but if you also add on the permit fee, which we'd like to propose, I believe the CPD Animal Control Services would actually see an increase in revenue from this amendment, thus making it easier to answer all calls by hiring if needed. I believe with the right restrictions surrounding this amendment, including no roosters, limits on size of property lots, limits on coop sizes, limits on amount of hens per square foot, a permit with an annual fee, and mandatory inspections if a complaint ever arises, we can have an amendment that would be a better fit to serve the people of Clovis. Some of the main complaints against hens tend to be noise, odor, and bug issues, but many will assure you the noise of a hen is not nearly as loud of a dog, which are legal in Clovis. With the proper requirements, odor would not be an issue as long as guidelines are followed. If they aren't, inspections should follow up, and guilty owners should be fined to offset the cost of said inspections. Hens are also great at eating a good amount of bugs, especially when let out to free roam, which would help especially on the Clovis city limits where we struggled for many years very badly with mosquitoes. And hens do not also attract flies, is a common lie, but as long as the coop is cleaned at minimum once a week, you will not see enough buildup of feces for flies to spawn in. Therefore, you will not see an increase in flies, rather a decrease in all bugs on your property in total. If you allow this amendment to go through, not only will you see an increase in revenue, you will also see a boost of morale in citizens, less waste, less panic next time we have egg shortages, and overall just a happier city. If cities like San Mateo, Turlock, Anaheim, Bakersfield, Cupertino, Long Beach, Huntington Beach, San Francisco, and many more can do it, why can't the great city of Clovis do it? Thank you very much. And then also, we have comments from a lot of great citizens of Clovis from the bottom of this page on the third page. After that, there's also an email from Sean and Christy Ferreria, I believe. They started the proposal in 2020 to get the restrictions off the hens. And after that, we have the San Mateo's ordinance and laws towards the chickens, kind of showing a way that Clovis may be able to do it, proving a path. After those 2 pages, we're on to a study that they did, backyard chickens in the United States. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if you go through the study, it shows some positive reactions. And then after that, you'll have the benefits of backyard chickens. And on the final page, you'll have a poll that I ran on the Nextdoor app. Only Clovis citizens are allowed on that app. You have to prove your address to be on there. So we had 253 votes total. 68% of them said they did want their hens back with the right restrictions in place. 32% said they did not want any hens back. And we had a lot of positive comments, but also some negative comments as well. I just wanted to make sure both sides are represented correctly. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Avakian. Anyone else here to speak? Public comments. Yes, go ahead. Just come forward. I'm sorry? Sure, if we can get a show of hands, if you're not going to speak, but so that way we can see. Okay. And I think there's several names also on your document here, and I'm assuming they're all Clovis residents from the statements that they're saying here. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Avakian. Go ahead. Please state your name and address for the record.
Angela Bates at 1214 Karen, Clovis. I wanted to come and in support of the backyard hens. I would like to address this more from an educational perspective. When you look at our schools and the children and what they're learning, how to care for things and whatnot, there really is, it doesn't show how to care for these animals or any farming until they get into maybe end of middle school or into high school. By that time, unless these kids are already growing up on a farm, they have no interest. They have no desire to know where their food comes from. They're very, they just want what they want now. So I need eggs, I'm going to go to the store for the eggs. I need what, you know, I mean, same thing with gardening and whatnot. I didn't really have anything prepared to speak. I'm just kind of speaking from my heart here. I have been here for over 30 years as well, and I have watched everything from what she has mentioned and all the shifts in Clovis. And if I'm not mistaken, one of my comments might be in there as well. But Clovis used to be farmland. That's what it was, you know. People flocked to Clovis, moved to Clovis because it was beautiful and the scenery, the nature, being able to help your children learn responsibilities starting at home, taking care of things. If these kids are learning to take care of small little animals or, you know, chickens, you know what I mean, then they learn to have empathy at such a young age, which is something I believe that we're lacking in Clovis, to be perfectly honest. We want Clovis to grow. We want Clovis to be amazing like it used to be, even more amazing than it used to be, with all of the new growth that has come in. But if all this new growth is pushing out what made Clovis so special to begin with, then where is Clovis really headed for? You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't grow Clovis anymore, but I mean, if we just keep growing and expanding, then all that agriculture and everything that we learned and everything that Clovis was from the very beginning ceases to exist. And then we're just a wart on Fresno. And I don't think anybody in Clovis wants to be considered a wart on Fresno. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Anyone else want to address the council? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Chip Whitfler. I live at 376 Burl Avenue. I don't know if Mr. Moanatua, Mr. Bessinger, if you remember me, but I gave a heartfelt speech a little bit less than 2.5 years ago when this issue came up in a different way, but the same issue came up. And I spoke to you about 3 basic issues, health and wellness, and odor and quality of life. And my wife, I brought up that my wife suffers from many disabilities. She is disabled, and one of those is a compromised immune system. And I basically spoke from my heart for her, and I know there are a lot of other residents of Clovis that have similar ailments. I look at the issue from chickens not from a personal like or dislike, because I grew up with chickens on a 160-acre ranch as a child and a youth. So I was around them all the time. We had 30, 40 chickens, several roosters, grew up all around them all the time. But my mom made sure that they were at least 100 yards from the house. That was her rule. She told my dad, yeah, you can have chickens, but they have to be out there somewhere. So he abided by that, and we did find that way. I live in a dense area with small lots. I have 4 neighbors that border my fence line, and I've had everything from exotic South American macaw, some kind of big bird from South America, in one of those backyards that would wake us up conveniently at daybreak every single day. I've had other neighbors' dogs break through my fence, and one of them attacked my dog that I had at the time. We've had a lot of problems with just those kinds of things, and we've used Clovis Police, thankfully, that they respond, and they respond quickly, and they were very helpful in helping us with the issues that we had with other kinds of pets that neighbors had. Back to knowing about chickens, I know what kind of odor they can put out. You have to be very, very meticulous in cleaning up after them to create a no-odor situation. I don't want the possibility of having 4 neighbors that have 3 hens and 100-degree heat day after day after day after day. I want to be able to go out and enjoy my yard. By the way, they do make a lot of noise when they lay an egg, and you can never predict when they lay an egg, so it could be very early in the morning. That's also another noise factor. I don't want any other kind of changes that would decrease the health ambience of Clovis, and I feel that bringing hens into our city would bring in the possibility of other kinds of diseases. And as I've stated, that's a very important issue in my family with my wife. I feel very strongly about this. I've been a resident for Clovis for 35 years, and there are many reasons why I've stayed here that long. My children went all through the school system, and they're all gone now, doing their own things in other places, but my wife and I wanted to stay here because we like the quality of life that we have here. I don't want to decrease the call times for the police, and I do know that from statistics from our last time around with this, that pet calls are either number 1 or number 2. I'm not sure what they are anymore, but they're right at the top of the list. So having more calls about, chickens in other people's yards, the odor, whatever that goes with that, I think will put a burden on them that they don't need at this time. I know they're short on staff, and Clovis Police is great, and I don't want any changes that might happen. We don't want that to be decreased or changed in any way. So I think that's probably all of my time. I thank you, and I do want to thank you again for the vote we got in our favor last time around, which was less than 3 years ago, and would hope that if this does become an agenda item, that we can still get that kind of support to keep Clovis the great city and town that it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Anyone else like to address the council? Yes.
Afternoon. My name is Garen Bates. I live at 1214 Karen. That beautiful woman over there is my wife. I've been in this town for 40 years. I'm a truck driver in construction, and I've helped destroy it from McGill to Friant, working for Builders Concrete, Clay Miranda, and now I'm with Tommy's Water Truck. That sign that's behind you, that's a farm right there. That started this town, and everybody wants to take it out. I apologize for your wife. My wife just got diagnosed with lupus. It's an autoimmune deficiency disorder. Her body now fights herself. But you know what? When she's on the farm, she's happy. I got a call from animal control. Somebody complained. Because I said, screw your law. I grew up in Clovis High. I went through FFA. Ken Diaz was my best friend. John Duran, Miss Gillis. I designed the ag farm that's at Clovis East while I was at Clovis High in 1989. We built that place. We designed it so the future kids of FFA could have a life. But you guys are destroying it by canceling out what Clovis has been. I've pulled the orange orchards out, and I've put in the concrete. And that's all this town has become is concrete. There's nothing for a kid to thrive on, to learn from, to grow an animal, to harvest it. You got kids now that are allergic to everything because you take it out of this town. You sit here, you can go out to Vangs. It's the biggest slaughter place now in Clovis because Wybert's is gone. You take your chickens out there, you slaughter them for $5. The dude's got thousands of chickens out there. You can pull into the property. Can you smell it? No. Why? Because he takes care of it. You can be a mile away from it. You can be inside his property. You can't smell it. But they get to have it. And you know what the sad thing is? They literally are a half a block from Clovis. They have a Fresno address. They're a half a block from Clovis East. Clovis East has a farm that we designed. Does it smell? No. Why? Because people take care of it. Now, if his wife has an immune deficiency disorder because of aviating animals, then maybe he can talk to his neighbors. He could talk to Clovis Police. He could talk to Animal Control. And instead of saying that, no, this family right here who is low income, who came to Clovis, who's trying to make it, who wants a better life for their kids, who wants the top school system that there is, because we're superior to Fresno, but they can't afford to go and pay $12 for a dozen of eggs. But you know what? They can go to Tractor Supply. They can get 2 hens for $4. They can bring them up with a chicken feed, and in 6 months they can start having their own eggs for the day. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if any of you have ever had farm fresh stuff. I grew up on it. 5,000 hogs in Merced County. That's what I grew up on. 500 acres of corn. That's what I grew up on. Sheep fields beyond belief. My dad was an animal professor from Merced City College. The guy that I grew up on his farm, which is Montague, he's a U.S. ag official now, and the kids run the farm. But you know what? You could be within a mile of that hog farm. You could smell it, but it doesn't kill you. It doesn't stink. It doesn't produce the methane that everybody thinks that Clovis is dying from. We're not dying from it. What we're dying from is the thousands of yards of concrete that I have laid in this town. I literally have laid sidewalk, curb and gutter, streets, underground piping, plumbing, everything you name it. From Fresno Community Hospital to Clovis Community Hospital to St. Agnes to Buchanan to every elementary school that has popped up in Clovis. Over the last 20 years, I was number 6 out of 100 in the rank of men over at Builders Concrete. I was with them for 17 years, and I watched every orange field from McGill, Willow, all the way out beyond Copper. And now I'm watching it. I'm part of it. I'm part of the high-speed rail. I'm part of the concrete that is destroying it. Give us a little bit of farmland back. We all have little plots in our backyards. Let us have something that we all came to Clovis for. Let us have our chickens back. Do whatever you got to do with costs. But let us, the happiness that my wife gets when we go to Tractor Supply and they got chickens in, I go, do whatever you want. I don't care. Because she holds those little birds and the smile beyond belief comes out of her. She raises them. She gets rid of them. We have some eggs. They're gone. I don't know why it's so hard. I don't get it. That board right there, those animals on that carving, that's what started this town. Don't kill it. Let us have it back. There's so many people here and vote for it. It's not hard. Just say yes. Just put some happiness in everybody's home. Let the kids learn what it's like to raise up a little animal, to process it, to eat it, to harvest it, the taste of it. Don't let them have store-bought stuff. I know I'm out of time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bates.
Good evening, City Council. Another Clovis service.
Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is June Venn. I live at 2635 Coventry Avenue in Clovis, 93611. I sent you all a letter via Mr. Holt that should have been distributed to you regarding all the negative impacts this will have if chickens are allowed in the backyard. It is signed by my husband, Eric Venn, and myself, if you happen to see it. I did not go into depth on every subject at this time. This is just an outline of things to take into consideration. I live on a
300 square foot lot. I share fences with 4 neighbors. And if all 4 of those neighbors choose to have chickens, I will literally be living in the middle of a chicken coop. I moved to Clovis in 2001 to buy my first home in the city. I don't want chickens in backyards. They don't belong there. They belong in the country, not the city. The city already has an overload of animal calls. The barking dog was brought up, that they're louder. Well, we have restrictions for barking dogs. It's called nuisance barking. I have used it many times. I don't think we need to bring all the negative impacts to our city. And if you decide to put this on the agenda and it is opened up for serious discussion, I would like the city to perform an environmental impact study. This is according to the CEQA. I believe we need that study done before any decisions can be made regarding chickens. We went over this in 2020. Several people do not want chickens, and everything I've listed here has not changed, except, of course, Mayor Ashbeck. Also, what was I going to say? Oh, my letter, which you received, and some of you may recognize from 2020, the only thing that does make it different is we are more populated than 2.5 years ago. This will affect so many people negatively. I hope that you make a conscious effort to really dig into this problem and this issue. But I would like put on the agenda that the City of Clovis perform an impact study analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Van.
Crystal Reed. In regards to the chickens, growing up in Clovis and being part of FFA and being part of 4-H and all that in Clovis, I also know Clovis's growth, and when you guys switch to 0 lot lines, there's still lots of houses that have big lots. There's even houses that have big lots that you guys they're advertising the pool-sized lots. I don't see a problem with chickens. I think chickens would actually impact Clovis in a great, it would greatly impact Clovis as far as the teaching kids and teaching, because that's been lost in our community, period. But you guys can put parameters on the size lots. Definitely, I wouldn't say somebody having a 0 lot line house. Most of those are HOAs anyways, and they're not allowed anyways. But 0 lot lines, I would definitely not have chickens. But there is room in Clovis for chickens. There's lots of lots, especially in the older developments, the old Bonadellis, the old Wilsons, the old ones, all that type of building, south of Shaw, between Ashland, in those older neighborhoods, those lots are really big, and it would not impact any neighbors. As far as smell, I'll take chickens over 20 cats any day. And Lord knows we've had those houses. We've lived next to those houses. I'll take chickens any day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Anyone else like to address the council?
Never done this before. Okay, my name is Michelle Sanders. I live at 2161 Polson Avenue. I've lived in Clovis for over 25 plus years in that same neighborhood. I have a disability personally. I have epilepsy. I am not able to work. I am not able to volunteer. I am at home 24/7. I was told by my doctor, because I was so stinking depressed, he said, find something to do at home that makes you feel good. And so I started gardening. Well, guess what I ran into? Bugs. And I thought, oh gosh, what do you do about bugs? So I went online and started looking for some options, and lo and behold, chickens are probably the best option for keeping bugs under wrap in your garden. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. So I started looking online, and guess what? It has become such a huge hobby to have backyard chickens right now. It is huge. Silicon Valley now it's considered one of the prime hobbies to have. It is considered an elite thing if you show up at a party instead of with wine, but with a dozen eggs, because they're farm fresh. They were just laid this last week, and wow, we want some of those eggs. So yes, I mean, Silicon Valley can do it, and they've got little bitty lots compared to what we have. I have a 10,000 square foot lot, but because of where I am located, we're not zoned because of just happens to be within a couple blocks of the what do you call those, tract homes. So we don't get to be in that same one. But I also have grandsons, and when they come over, I take great joy in taking them out to the garden and saying, look, this tomato grew. God, we planted this seed, and God helped it grow, and here's a tomato. And, oh, my gosh, to be able to go and also show them, look, this chicken laid an egg. Isn't this so cool? That bird that's been walking around all day somehow made this little hard thing that you're going to be able to eat for breakfast today, and it has so much vitamin D in it that is totally exceeds what you can get at the grocery stores that you pay $10 for now. Okay, so what was the next thing I was going to talk about? Oh, yeah, the concern about rats and birds and everything else causing a problem or bringing in avian flu and all the stuff that comes up. Then I say, if we're going to regulate, then doggone regulate. Get rid of the geese in Clovis. I mean, go through and get rid of them. They poop over everything. As far as noise, they're what wakes me up in the morning, the geese flying over. So I don't have a problem with that. I mean, gosh, chickens are really quiet, especially if you only have 2 or 3, and they're happy, you know. From what I understand, just give them a little food in the morning, they'll shut up, and then they put themselves up at night all by themselves. They just, like magic, go and get in their coop, and they sleep from sundown to sun up, and you don't hear them at all, let alone the dogs behind me that you do. So if we're going to regulate, then get rid of the geese. You're going to have to get rid of fruit trees, because fruit trees draw rats. You're going to have to get rid of all the gardens, because rats like gardens too, and then bird seed. You're going to have people say no more bird feeders, because that also attracts rodents and bugs and everything else. Okay, so that is what I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sanders.
Thank you for hearing me.
Anyone else would like to address the council on an item that's not on the agenda? Okay. And I'm assuming, John, that this is something in which the mayor can make a decision to put on the agenda or not, should they attack? Correct. They should reach out to the mayor regarding what to do next, if there's...
Correct. Council could act this evening if you wanted to direct us to bring something back on the agenda. It will be similar to, this came forward in March of 2020, came back to City Council in June and July of 2020, and ultimately it was denied 3-2 in July, and then came back a year later to delay it, and that's when Council decided to not move forward with it, and that's where we ended up. So the report that you would get would be similar to what you saw in June of 2020.
And I would advise Mr. Vacan, you and those who are here this evening, if you would reach out to John to read that agenda or those minutes and hopefully that'll give you some background. I know it was a different council at that time, and then after that, you can reach out to the mayor to see if she would be willing to place that on the agenda for us to discuss formally. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else here to address the council on any item not on the agenda? Okay. I would note for the record that we did receive Mr. Whippler's email and Mr. Avakian's, and there is a packet here by Mr. Avakian. Anyone on the web? Anyone online? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion. There are no ordinances and resolutions. We'll move now. Do I need to read that part, John, with the ordinance and resolutions? Okay. With respect to approval of resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution or ordinance shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. And then now we'll move to consent calendar, and items on consent are routine in nature and to be placed on the consent calendar. They will be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless a council member requests individual consideration. A council member's vote in favor of the consent calendar is considered and recorded as a separate affirmative vote in favor of each action listed. Motions in favor of adoption of the consent calendar are deemed to include a motion to waive the reading of any ordinance or resolution of the consent calendar. For adoption of ordinances, only those that have received a unanimous vote upon introduction are considered consent items. Is there anyone pulling any item from the consent calendar? Okay, I have requested that item 3 be pulled, so that way we can hear a report on that. Any others? Anyone in the public would like to pull any of the items on the consent calendar? Anyone online?
No.
Okay. Seeing none, if we can get a motion to approve items 1, 2, and 4.
Motion to approve consent calendar items 1, 2, and 4.
Second. Okay, we have motion and second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Item 3, and if you can present this. I wanted to pull this because I wanted to make sure that the public just get a full report with regards to the Measure C funds, since that has been on the ballot just last November, but just how we have been using those funds. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and the members of the council. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce Tatiana Partain to my right. She is a management analyst in planning and development services. She was just promoted about 6 months ago, and she works with grant funding, management, active transportation, and other items, and she works on the Measure C stuff, so that's why she's sitting here tonight. So on an annual basis, the city receives a little over $6 million in local Measure C transportation and in regional transit program funds for various improvements and operations. The city is obligated to submit expenditure reporting to the Fresno County Transportation Authority on an annual basis. That's what is attached to the report you have. Planning and Development Services oversees the local transportation funding, which equates to about $4 million per year. Transit receives approximately about $2 million a year. Measure C helps fund the design and construction of many street improvements throughout the city each year, and is also used to leverage other grant funding, and is used as the match requirements for our grant funding. In 1986, Fresno County voters passed Measure C, which is a half-cent sales tax measure to fund transportation improvements in the county. In November 2006, voters approved an extension of Measure C through 2027. The sales tax collected by Measure C is allocated into various programs, and these programs include a regional transportation program, a regional public transit program, and a local transportation program. And then Planning and Development Services oversees the funds allocated under both the local and regional transportation programs. The local transportation program then is further divided into sub-programs, and that's street maintenance, ADA compliance, flexible category, the pedestrian trails, and bicycle facilities. So there's funds that are allocated to each of those sub-programs that have to be used for those specific items. The funds collected under the local transportation program help to fund many routine and annual projects throughout the city, such as ADA ramp improvements, annual slurry seal project, bicycle lane restriping, trail counter management, and special projects and studies related to transportation. So in the fiscal year 2021, besides our typical annual projects I just mentioned, the Measure C funded the Armstrong alluvial to Nees, the design of Shaw Armstrong to Temperance, a vehicle detection replacement citywide. It was design of that project, design of Sunnyside 3rd to Barstow, and design Sierra Willow to Peach, and then there was funds expended for the active transportation plan update. In upcoming street maintenance projects using Measure C in 2022-23, the current fiscal year, it's the design of Herndon Fowler to Armstrong, design of Nees, Clovis to Sunnyside, and the construction of Sunnyside Avenue, street improvements 3rd to Barstow. So since the last renewal in 2026, the Measure C regional transportation program has been the primary funding sources for 11 large widening projects throughout the city. The regional Measure C projects for the city include, Willow, Temperance, Herndon, and Shaw, and there's 11 total since 2007. Now, and just to kind of highlight three of the most current regional projects. There's Willow, Shepherd to Copper Avenue, which was over $10 million total project costs, and half of that was Measure C. Half was local partnership program funds from the state, which the only reason we got those funds is because of the Measure C dollars. Then Herndon, Temperance Avenue to DeWolf Avenue, that's a $14 million project. It's yet to be constructed, and there's $11.2 million in Measure funds on that project. And then Shaw Avenue, which part of it's being constructed between Leonard and McCall right now, from DeWolf to McCall, the whole project, so $21 million of Measure C funds are on that project. So very critical, these Measure C funds. So not including the regional program funds, the city has expended over about $30 million of Measure funds since 2007. And this has helped fund over $60 million of local transportation and transit projects. So a little update on the Measure C renewal. You had mentioned previously that was on the ballot. Yes, the renewal was on the ballot. It failed. That means the current measure will expire in 2027 unless there's a measure to replace it approved. So that measure was going to raise an estimated $6.8 billion for Fresno County and about $600 million for the city of Clovis. I've reached out to FCTA, and they've informed me that they're working on some post-election polling, and we'll have findings released in April for those post-election polling. And they're also performing stakeholder interviews right now to try to get an idea of the direction of to move forward. So this concludes staff's report, and staff is available for questions.
Any questions of the staff regarding this report? It's not really a comment, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I thank you for pulling it off the consent calendar. I think that a lot of folks don't understand fully the importance of Measure C in our budget for roads and transit. We had a very lively discussion here last week about a project that was proposed, which my misgivings weren't the project, it was the road, because the road needed to be updated. And when you look at roads like alluvial between Sunnyside and Fowler, knees between, Sunnyside and Clovis Avenue. Those are very expensive. I know that people really appreciate the expense of those because of it's not just paving the road, it's doing everything underneath too, which is very expensive. And I thought that the anti-Measure C people were oversimplifying some of this and making it political and not in the interest of people, quite frankly. That's all I have to say.
Any other questions for staff regarding this project? Well, thank you, Ryan, and welcome, Tatiana, to looking over, I think, such an important, but I think when it's so well managed, like in our city, that sometimes the citizens take it for granted how much it has benefited our city. I mean, you look at 18 projects, and some of them regional, of course, but that benefited us directly, and that's not even dollar for dollar the sales dollars that we put in. I mean, a good majority of the dollars that our citizens are putting in are being shared with the county, with other jurisdictions, and to be able to improve roads all around. And not only that, we are actually benefiting with regards to transit, and to be able to operate a transit system that is free to our citizens, I mean, at least since COVID, is something phenomenal that we have been able to do, and we are able to be innovative because of Measure C funds. And, you know, we forget about the matching, and I'm glad that in the report you mentioned the matching, that how important it is to have matching dollars in order to complete a project. We can design it, but if there aren't funds to match and then to complete it, that is so important. I just wanted the citizens to know that there's, I would say, 3 levels of oversight. First is here directly with our staff and then with us approving it. But before even it gets here, there's a Citizens Oversight Committee that oversees every application of the use of funds. That goes into the Transportation Authority, and they approve it as well. And so there's 3 areas or 3 places in which, if any of our residents have concerns with or want to question the expenditure or the priorities, given that you have many areas in which to come and give input. And I want to commend our staff. Ever since the inception in 2007, that's when I first met our planning director in those Citizens Oversight Committee, that Clovis is typically the most prepared, the most thorough with regards to those applications, the explanation, and the uses, so that when it gets to the Citizens Committee and then to the Transportation Authority, there's hardly any questions because we are that prepared. And so that's something that our staff has allowed the council to enjoy, just, you know, very good accountability with regards to the funds used. And so we'll see what happens in the future, but thank you for that report, for just allowing the citizens to really know how we use the funds. We're going to open up to the public now. Anyone in the public like to address this item? Okay, anyone online?
No.
Okay. We'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
Motion to approve item 3. Second.
Okay. We have motion second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll move now to administrative items. Item number 5, which is our 2023 5-year financial forecast for the city of Clovis through 27-28. And discuss options for budget preparations for 23-24. This was continued from our last week's meeting, and staff to present, it will be Jay, our finance director.
Good evening, Mayor, Pro Tem, members of the council. This evening I do have our annual 5-year forecast. Although it is 5 years in nature, we do come back every March to refresh it, kind of as a start to where we think we're going to be in the short term and longer term, and kind of as an intro for the budget. So the feedback that I get here this evening will impact potentially the direction of the budget this year as we progress. So Just a brief introduction. The 5-year forecast is a snapshot in time. We basically start this document in January and build out dozens, if not hundreds, of assumptions on growth, on expenditures, CPI, capital needs, staffing needs, and so it's just that moment in time. And most certainly from January to now, things have changed. But what we're really trying to do is take a longer-term approach on what the city may look like, not just a few months down the road, but potentially years. It's more likely in the short term that we will realize something similar to what's in the document than the long term. Most certainly 5 years from now, it will look different than what this document looks like. So we do analyze all the funds, the enterprise funds, water, sewer, refuse, but the main emphasis is on the general fund, and that's due to the constraints on the revenues, mainly being tax revenues, and the demand for the expenditures, general fund, park, senior center, public safety, the lion's share of the budget. So, like I said before, this is typically the basis for the budget, so any direction given tonight will be integrated as part of the budget process. So a few highlights here. The budget is balanced, especially the general fund. In other words, our revenues exceed our expenditures and transfers out. One of the major concerns that we've had on an ongoing basis is our PERS commitment for several years and years into the future. And really, this is something that we have to plan for because it's not negotiable. We cannot not pay PERS. So every year you'll see this very large cost in there until the plan is better funded than it is now. We do have rate increases scheduled for water, sewer, and community sanitation, and we'll talk about those in a few. So for the general fund forecast overview, we are showing the possibility of additional officers in every year. We're showing the possibility of 5 officers next year and 3 on an ongoing basis, at least as we stand today. We have added additional funding for general government facilities for capital projects. Historically, that has been a very large challenge for the city to put those capital dollars away for much needed infrastructure. We have funded fleet replacement vehicles. So since the beginning of the Great Recession, we have depleted the fleet program to the point where we are at having to lease every single vehicle that we've purchased, fire truck, police car, anything in the general fund. And so what we've done is funded through a combination of one-time monies and ongoing fleet replacement charges, the build back of that fleet so that we're not at the mercy of leasing every single vehicle in the future as the interest rates deteriorate from where they're currently at. We're showing that we can maintain the emergency reserve at approximately 23%. So we have basically held to a point over the forecast that says while our goal is 25%, we can at least maintain at a 23 over the period. And really the discretionary revenues are projected to grow at a slower rate, which I'll show you here in a few. But that's really hindering our ability to grow is our revenues. Our demands for expenditures always outpace our revenues. So to take a look at the general fund revenues and expenditures, and it's not so much that the blue line represents the revenues and the blue bars is the revenues and the line is the expenditures, it's really this growth right here that was mainly one-time revenues, whether it be from the federal government, the CARES Act, the ARPA. This right here was unsustainable, and what you find now is that we're having to reset our revenues to a much more conservative growth right here. So what we had here over the last couple of years by no means was sustainable, and we realized that, and we have basically reset it here at something more normal on an ongoing annual basis over the forecast. So if you take a look at those one-time revenues that I mentioned, specifically the ARPA money and the CARES Act, you really see these large spikes in one-time monies that we have chosen as a city to spend on one-time projects, fire station 2, the fire training facility, funding of fleet. So these 2 years here represent $18 million in transfers for 2021. and approximately 9 for 21-22. That's split approximately 18 million in general government facilities and 9 million in the fleet program to basically purchase for cash some vehicles and also set aside some funding so that on an ongoing basis we can continue those programs. If you take a look at our budget this year for 22-23, you'll see a more normalized capital outlay of what's more realistic on an ongoing basis, that $1 million to $3 million level to where we're taking care of some capital needs. $1.3 million went to the Landmark Square. The $300,000 there, I just wanted to comment on that because that's really a study that we plan on doing to better assess our capital needs in the future so that we can better prepare for those deteriorating assets like the one that we're in. And then the 990 is approximately 15 vehicles that we also put aside just kind of as that catch-up for the program. So if we looked at our unrestricted fund balance, I think of this as money in the checking account, not necessarily savings account, but checking account. We typically try to keep $1, maybe $2 million in there on an ongoing basis, just to help for any kind of little slips in the economy that we don't need to touch anything in the more restrictive savings account or cut services. So you'll see that line spike up, and then if it does, then we program it in typically to one-time expenditures to bring it back in line with that, somewhere around $1 million, $2 million. It could be argued that should be a little bit higher based off of our general fund, now north of $100 million a year. If we take a look here at the emergency reserve dollars, and the graph is a little bit confusing, I apologize, but the green bars represents the dollars going out, and the black bar represents the percentages of emergency reserve. So over the last several years, we used those one-time monies for projects, and we also used it to better fund the emergency reserve. And then you can kind of just see over the forecast period that we're just trying to maintain that 23% approximately. We're not able to grow it any further, but we're trying to maintain it over the period. If you look at our sales tax dollars as far as a trend line, if you will, you'll see that the last several years have been anything short of out of the ordinary. They've been double-digit gains over the last several years, and really this document's probably being a little bit optimistic on the sales tax as far as the growth rate goes. People are changing what they spend money on, and the last couple of years have really been better than most, and we've had to basically try to reset that down, but we may still be a little bit high, at least from what we're seeing currently, that we have a 3-4% growth in there. Right now we're basically flat. So if we were to continue on the long term what we're experiencing on the short term, the sales tax revenues would be optimistic at this point. If you look at our property taxes, they're a lot more stable as a revenue source, assuming we continue to grow at a fairly stable pace of units. Right now, on the short term, we're not seeing that, but this document does not predict a housing slowdown, and so there is not one in this document. We are basically saying that on average, we are going to grow at our long-term average of approximately 800 units, and this document reflects the revenues associated with that growth. So I mentioned it earlier, but our CalPERS costs, are, again, a confusing graph, but the bars going up representing the dollars and the percentages of the safety plan on top and the miscellaneous plan on the bottom. The biggest takeaway from here is the $9 million on the left and the $17 million on the right over the chart. You know, those are really large increases in annual commitments related to the general fund, and we don't have an option to not pay those. So that concludes my general fund analysis, and I'm just going to move on quickly through the enterprise funds. So if you take a look at each one of them individually, the revenues and the expenditures are charted out just to give you an idea that they're pretty well run, but they all require mainly their rate increases on an annual basis to keep up with their expenditure commitments. You do see a few places where revenues may exceed expenditures, or in 2021 the opposite, but we have one-time capital projects that will we'll throw 1 year off, but it's been planned for that expenditure. On the sewer, looks similar. It just, you see those 2 years, those are basically our one-time capital commitments at the regional facilities. So whether they get pushed 1 year or 2 years at some point here, you'll see those kind of move along until we actually incur the expenditures. The community sanitation, it's the same type idea where we had some one-time land purchases that have spiked a couple of years that the city has decided we need that capital, and so once you get through those capital expenditures, you go back to basically a balanced program. But like I did mention, all the rate increases for water, sewer, and refuse are currently required. I would note, to go back briefly on the sewer, is right now we show the bond surcharge rebate of possibly going away later on in the forecast. In other words, we would need to bring that back to balance the sewer fund. But when you're in year 4 and year 5, that's probably premature to say that for certainty that's going to happen.
Jay? Yes, sir. Could you expand on that a little bit, because some of the council members might not understand what the surcharge is? Sure.
So during the recession, the revenues for our bond commitments were not adequate. We did not meet the bond covenants related to our debt. So in order for that to happen, we had to go to the users and establish a bond surcharge of $3.65 per month, or $7.30 per billing cycle, to all the rooftops in the city to help meet the bond covenants and the debt service payment. It's not something that as a city we wanted to do, but the bond commitments were such that we were forced to do that. At some point, the revenues from the development impact fees caught back up, and we basically put that rebate on hold, or I should say that charge went to a rebate. So we were charging the user $7.30, and we were also rebating them back the same. At one point, we were also actually giving them more than that back for a couple of years, but it's there. If and when we need it, we will bring it back, but the idea is that we wouldn't need to take the bond surcharge back to the users. So just pause just for a moment on the transit and talk about the Measure C, which is outside the scope of this, but as it's decided whether Measure C is sunsetting or not, this transit program as presented here would and could look significantly different in the out years if Measure C was to go away. As they mentioned, that is several $1 million to the program, so we would definitely have to pivot significantly in the revenues if Measure C was to go away for this program as it currently exists. So Planning and Development Services shows that it is also adequately funded on an annual basis. The one caveat here is that if slowdown was to happen here in the residential units, the possibility of shifting staff could and likely would happen to other programs that are not as sensitive to the residential market on a temporary basis, which we've done in the past. But right now, as presented, it's shown that Planning and Development Services is balanced on an ongoing basis. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for staff on the 5-year forecast? Jay, I had a couple questions. So there's a $2.8 million carryover from what I read. And so is that because of the ARPA funds, or is this just in general everything combined?
From prior year, or?
Yeah, for prior year. So
we don't always hit the exact mark where we thought we were going to land at year, and in this case, sales tax was higher than we anticipated. At the same time, negotiations were happening, and so we built out this year's budget with the idea of a COLA that was based off of a CPI indicator and not necessarily what was actually negotiated. So the funds came in higher than expected, and then we also knew the potential for potentially costs that were different. So we did not get really, really aggressive on the revenues versus expenditures in the current year for fear that we may need more money, which was the case.
And then for, I guess, next year, we'll see the first TOT, the increase in the funds, the projected increase?
Right, so the TOT increase went live 1/1. So we will start to see for the first, 2 quarters here that increase, but really where you're going to see that potentially, $600,000 that was estimated from just the differential, you would see it programmed into next year's budget.
It'll be next, okay. And then the property taxes, I read in here that it's 1.1 million above what we projected?
Correct. So
why is that? Do you know why? Because there were more homes built than we expected? Is that what happened?
Yeah, so it's a combination of factors, but that is part of it, that we grew faster than we anticipated, and again, there's a large lag between the purchase and then ultimately the assessor's roll, but it came in healthier than we estimated based off of number of units.
And then the estimate is that will it more level off?
So right now we're projecting at this 800 unit count growth. The problem is 2 years from now, if we don't hit that number now, our property taxes are going to level off quite a bit a couple of years from now. So there is this 1 to 2 year delay between what's being built now versus where that's going to show up in the budget. So if we don't grow 800 units this year, but we make up for it next year, 3 years down the road, we wouldn't notice a difference. But if we permanently shrink from our 800 average for a moment in time, most certainly it'll show up in property taxes a couple years from now.
And if I could expand on it a little bit, is going to be, the lag is really important to understand, because I think 2 years ago we built about 1,100 homes. And the 1 point whatever it is that's in there is because of those 1,100 homes. In the 5-year forecast, I think 850, something like that, is our 30-year average. We have 800 in there in the 5 years. The analysis for the 5-year begin in January. We're now in March, a couple months later, and I think we're at about 200 units right now. So the difference between the 5-year and the budget could be pretty significant if things don't change between now and mid-April to late April, when we begin to kind of finalize the budget to bring it back to you in May. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that.
But we won't make any adjustments unless that cycle repeats itself, I'm assuming.
Well, okay, so like I said, the 5-year includes the 800 in total. If we get into mid-April and we're at 250 units or 300 units, I'm going to make a recommendation that we adjust the budget, which is the 1-year budget. Nothing's going to change in the 5-year, but in the budget, we're probably going to make some adjustments that make sense based on the reality and kind of forecasting out what it's going to do over the next 12 to 18 months. Okay. And those changes in revenue projections definitely have an impact on expenditure projections.
Yeah. I had a question about that comment too.
Yeah. John, is this delay kind of caused by the issue with PG&E not being able to, these houses aren't being built out because?
Not at all. That's a different situation. Okay. But this is just going to be the normal process with the Fresno County Assessor's Office to get the system in there. And on a good year, it'll be a 12-month lag. If it's a bad year, it could be 18 to 24. So that's just the normal timing of when a home is occupied and when the city begins to receive the revenues associated with it.
Thank you. Councilmember Baskin.
Yeah, so going to the 5-year forecast as it pertains to police. So we're saying this year the police department will get 5 positions?
In the document, yes, we are saying that next year we're planning on hiring 5 additional sworn officers to go from the 112 to the 117.
So to go to 117, and then we only put in 3 per year for the next 4 years, which is only 12 more positions, which still leaves us 15 to 20 positions behind.
Correct.
So I think that's just such a huge problem you know, that we're actually documenting it out again. When I was here before I was on council talking about this specific thing, it was, we're going to put a minimum of 5 in per year and figure out a way to make it happen. And now we're already in the position where we're dropped it to 3 per year, and we're not even sure if we're going to be able to afford that, if I'm understanding right.
Correct. And
because this is all based on getting 800 units per year, but there's a very good chance that we're going to go into a housing recession of some sort based on the number of permits that were pulled this year, where we stand going into next year.
correct. And it's more than just the 800 units that drive the change in revenues. Sales tax coming down, anything else?
So I guess my question is, you know, we know this, we're forecasting this is going to happen. So we're going to have to look at what we do in the future to try and figure this out, because it's been year after year after year where we, you know, everybody does their best, tries to figure out how do we maintain the budget, but the police department doesn't grow. And we continue to be at a rate that's 1 per officer or less per 1,000, which is the lowest rate in the entire valley. Yet, we're expected to have our officers do so much more in this community. And I've said it as chief, I'm saying it now, I worry that we are going to lose parts of this city. We are not going to get back if we don't find a way to figure this out. And if we wait 5 years down the road, it's going to be too late. So I know I'm preaching, I know I'm on my soapbox, but at the same time, you know, I guess it really comes back to is, as a city, do we need to start looking at things differently on how we spend our money and make our money? You know, whatever that is, I'm all for it. I'm all for whatever ideas are out there. But, you know, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, being from the finance, are there any other ideas out there that we should be looking at that we should be helping promote? We should be, you know, doing what we can to help you bring those monies in, or whatever it's going to be for the long term.
Well, I don't think my place here is to advocate for, you know, revenue enhancements other than educating potentially what's out there. But, you know, the city making choices to put aside one-time monies for fleet improved the position of public safety going forward. So where we could invest dollars to lower the overall cost of the program is what we've chosen to do over the last couple of years. But the city has to decide what, I think the city has identified what its priorities are, but to what level can you fund it based off of existing resources to the best of your ability? And then if you were to choose to enhance public safety, for instance, in this case, what program would you possibly take it from? It's all competing for the same monies, obviously, but, you know, we put away for a rainy day, which is the emergency reserve. We put into capital to some extent. Is it adequate? I mean, there's arguments that for that area, which is also competing for the same dollars. So I don't think it's an answer that I can give you directly tonight, other than the possibility of exploring where we're spending our money, and is that where council wants to spend it, and if there's not enough, what are the options to go look otherwise for more funds?
Right. So I noticed in the document it said up to $800,000 from the TOT tax going forward. Last week during the presentation on the hotels, there was the occupancy rate at one point was 75%, then it fell to 66%. I understand that there's more hotel rooms. Now, obviously, there's more hotel options out there. You know, I guess my question is will it maintain 800,000, or does that look like it'll be less? Is that money going to be dedicated towards public safety or positions? I know we probably aren't supposed to say that because it's a general tax, but I don't know. I just fear, having lived through the 2007 recession, trying to rebuild, do all those kind of things, that, and as well as many people sitting behind you have the staff, that we're going to be right back to that position, if not worse, based on, you know, our growth of the city, where we've already grown back to, and then not being able to keep up with our resources. Other than, which, I mean, it's great that everything else is built in, you know, I mean, that's awesome, what water and sewer and everybody else are able to do. So, you know, if that means that we have to start looking for a public safety tax, if that means, that's the only option, then those are things I think as council we have to seriously explore and figure out if we're going to do that now or if we're going to, wait another cycle or whatever it may be. But I really think for the health of the city and the police department and fire department, because they're general fund dependent, we have to do something.
Yeah.
And if I can just add,
I just want to say that I think the staff is going to bring something in April with regards to specifically that. So that'll be on discussion for us. John, you want to add something?
The only thing I was going to add was going to be that if you look at we either increase revenues or reduce expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're looking right now at the general fund $100 million budget, 87% of the discretionary expenditures are for public safety. So we have a really small window to cut quite a bit to make a little bit of benefit for the police department. At council's direction a month ago, you directed staff to come back with some options to take a look at as far as a revenue structure. So on April 3rd, I'll come back to City Council and make a presentation for council to consider and then take direction from that.
Councilman Bessinger.
Thank you.
I'm going to get up on Matt's soapbox for a second. Council sets the direction. We have a general fund for the police department. We, as a group, prior council, said that we would use the TOT funds for police officer positions. And I know that Bob Whalen would think this is sacrilegious, but we have a reserve for a reason. And if, as a council, in the future, we decide that we're going to get 5 positions a year, and if we have to take money out of reserve to make that cover, then that's what we do. But that's obviously a discussion for another time, but we set that direction. Thank you.
And at the proposal, what Councilwoman Bessinger stated, that's at the budget time where something like that will be made, John?
Specific to
the reserves?
You can.
Reallocating?
You can.
Okay.
And I think that the only rules of engagement on that, it requires a 4/5 vote. Staff would never recommend supporting it just because you're spending one-time money on permanent expenditures, and it's just a matter of time before you run into serious situations having no reserves.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Jay, can you refresh my memory? When are ARPA funds needed to be expended by the end of this year? Was it last year already?
The way that we handled the ARPA funds was there was a loss provision that was allowed, and we calculated the loss based off of the provisions that were allowed, and we met. The loss was significant on paper related to ARPA. So what that allowed us to do was, generally speaking, use those funds for the provision of public safety, or fancy way to say, public safety dollars. And so as I reported out the ARPA funds, that's exactly what I spent it on, was public safety dollars. What that allowed to happen was dollars that normally would have paid for the public safety salaries and benefits were then freed up for other purposes, which is your one-time projects list that I showed you earlier, the fire station rebuild, the fire training facility. Those were funded by those transplanted dollars from ARPA.
Okay.
So they were one-time in nature. They came in. We paid public safety salaries and benefits with it. That money that normally would have been spent was spent on one time. So convoluted way to protect myself that I did not spend ARPA funds in an incorrect manner.
So those funds will be expended by December of 2024?
Yes.
Okay. That's the drop dead.
The reality is that for quarters upon quarters now, I've been reported it all out as being previously spent.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, we'll open up to the public for any comments or questions with regards to the 5-year forecast. If you would state your name again for the record.
Des House, 1027 Loyola. I just wanted to commend Jay and Councilmember Baswell and Bessinger and everyone really, because you're executing your fiduciary responsibility to have the best interest of the city at heart. As a citizen of Clovis, as someone that cares deeply for this community, public safety is huge. Both fire and police have made it very clear that, you know, they need the money, but the pie is only so big. We don't want to take anything else from any of the other departments. So I commend staff, and I'm looking forward to hearing the options that will be available with what we can do to bring in more general revenue.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else here to address this item? Anyone on the web?
No.
Okay. This time we'll bring it back to the council. I think this is a...
Receive and file.
Receive and file. Okay. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
For it. We'll move now to administrative item number 6. It's a resolution approving the annual review and update to the Regional Housing Needs Overlay District map of parcels and associated lists reflecting those parcels that qualify for development as a RENA overlay project. And the staff on this is Dave Merchant.
Thank you. As you noted, this is the discussion and annual review and update to the Regional Housing Needs Overlay. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the housing element process and how we got here, then talk a little bit about the overlay district itself, and then finally I'll show you what the this year's annual review analysis concludes. As I've noted in previous discussions, housing elements are required for every city and county. They're overseen by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. Housing elements are required to be updated every 8 years, and each update and its reporting period is referred to as a cycle. We are currently operating under the 5th cycle housing element, which was adopted by the city back in 2016. We're working on the 6th cycle right now. We just released today a draft of the 6th cycle housing element, and that's what will be presented for discussion at your joint meeting with the Planning Commission next week. Every housing element cycle must show that the city has sufficient land inventory to accommodate its housing needs, and that inventory must look at housing for various income categories from very low and low income all the way up to above moderate. When the State Department of Housing and Community Development looks at affordability, they're generally equating, at least at the low income category, housing opportunities with density. And so at this point, in the current cycle, low-income housing opportunities must accommodate at least 20 units per acre. Back when we were working on the 5th cycle housing element, we looked back at the 4th cycle inventory and determined that there were some requirements that were applied at the 4th cycle that we didn't fulfill. And that's called a carryover analysis, and it resulted in what might be called a carryover requirement or a carryover burden. And in that analysis, we ultimately were required by HCD to designate land inventory to accommodate a little over 4,400 units at 20 units an acre minimum. After considering a variety of strategies on how to do that, a couple of strategies were ultimately adopted by the city. One of which is this Regional Housing Needs Overlay, and that was established back in November of 2018. The RHN Overlay is was specifically adopted as a tool to help the city meet its RENA carryover burden. The overlay itself allows development of multifamily housing at 35 to 43 units per acre as a permitted or by right use. That means that there are no public hearings required. There's no discretionary action on the part of the city. It's basically a building permit. Housing must fall within that density range. Housing isn't permitted at 34 units an acre, nor is it permitted at 44 units an acre. It's got to fall specifically within that density range. Housing sites that are included in the overlay also have the option to develop at their existing or regular density. So there's a base density on a property of low density residential that typically allows 2 to 4 units per acre. An owner or developer wishing to develop on that site has the opportunity to develop a single family residential subdivision at 2 to 4 units per acre, or they can take advantage of the overlay and develop multifamily housing all the way up at that high density range of at least 35 and not more than 43 units per acre. Any project that's proposing to develop using that overlay has to meet the development standards that are built into the overlay district, and that's basically things like height and parking and setbacks and so forth. So what parcels can qualify to be included in the regional housing needs overlay? The district itself applies to all residentially zoned properties between 1 and 10 acres in size. Those are based on the requirements of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Larger parcels can qualify if they can be divided down into usable sites, not more than 10 acres. And then parcels have to be free of any constraints which would preclude them from developing as RHN projects. So those are things like the physical characteristics of the site, conformance with HCD regulations, entitlement history, any legal actions, and so forth. So there's those qualifications criteria that I described, and then any parcels which are deemed to be eligible need to be shown on a map and a list of sites that is maintained by the Planning and Development Services Department. And that map and list are reviewed annually by the council, which is what we're doing here this evening. During any year, parcels that are deemed to be no longer eligible can be removed by the Director of Planning and Development Services, and that's applicable this year, where 3 sites came off the list. And then new parcels can be added during the City Council's annual review. So this one slide basically shows the results of the current year annual review. When the year started, which was essentially March of 2022, there were 30 sites in the Regional Housing Needs Overlay. During this year, during the last year, 3 sites were removed by the Director because they were developed for other uses. There are no new sites that are proposed by any party, and none have been identified by staff. And so that would leave the city with 27 remaining sites in its inventory. The municipal code requires that at least one publicly noticed meeting be held to review the Regional Housing Needs Overlay District. That meeting was conducted on March 1st. There were no attendees and no public comments offered during that meeting. And so with that in mind, staff is recommending that the council adopt the resolution approving the annual review and update to the Regional Housing Needs Overlay. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions of staff regarding overlay?
Yeah, just a quick question. So when you show the overlay of the housing, just so I understand it, are these lots already zoned for whatever housing needs to go there, or would they have to go through the process as well each time somebody wants to build on them?
Right. So each of the sites that are shown on this map has, let's just call it a base zoning and general plan designation that could be like a low density or medium density. And then they're also covered by the overlay, which is what allows the 35 to 43 units per acre. So both of those zoning options are in place today, and no further action is required to use either one of them. Except, I guess you could say, if somebody wanted to come in and use their base zone district, they would have to come in and get a subdivision map approved by the Planning Commission.
So if somebody came in and said, I want to use lot 10 for 35 to 43 units.
Building permit.
Per acre, we wouldn't have to go through a rezone process on that. It's already in place.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Dave, I had a couple of questions. So 489 units, the 3 sites were taken away, and that was a director decision, correct?
Correct.
And I guess my question for the council to think about is, do we need to set more criteria, because we will own it in the end? Because right now there's 5,128 remaining, and we're required to zone for 4,209. So my fear is that, is it just, here it is, here's the last 4,209, you no longer get a choice. You have to keep that in the overlay. Or do we want to set something in which we look at and go, hey, 37 is a better site for us to keep that overlay than 5. So let's set something, or is that something that is happening on staff level as well, so that we get assurances? Because if we don't, then maybe we get the least desirable, if there is such a thing as all these 30-something sites here, that where we will be responsible, who's going to build on top of Kmart? You know, who's going to build on top of the places we we put on where it would not be the most conducive or ready. And so that I wanted to see if the current process is, this comes to us once a year, so every year we may get, oh, okay, another 4 sites went away, and it was done already. So now we have 4,900 left, 4,600 left units. So just,
I have to assume, Bong, that as we grow up into Heritage Grove, there's going to be additional RENA sites that will be able to offset taking other ones out. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that was my second question, was exactly that these 4,200, is that going to be added to the 9,000 that we are going to get in this next cycle, where we can now take some of these overlay away, or are these staying, and what we approved sort of last week with Heritage Grove is more anticipated for those 9,000, or that'll help as well with our...
Right. Those are great questions. I think during the workshop next week, or the joint meeting with the Planning Commission, we'll get into the 6th cycle inventory, and it'll be a little more clear at that point. At this point, our understanding is the 6th cycle inventory with the 9,000 units that we're planning for will replace in its entirety the 4th and 5th cycle that are in place today. So effectively, we're looking at something like the next year and a half or so operating under what inventory we've got now, and that will be replaced. I'm sorry, that's not true. It's the end of 2023 is when the new inventory will take place. So less than a year from now is when the 6th cycle inventory will kick in.
All right. Those are just my comments. I know that we are keeping a watchful eye on the inventory, and I think with what decision we made last week will help with regards to planning for these units and with the new cycle coming forward. So, yes, thank you. Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for taking the time to explain it. I know some of my questions, might be out there a little bit, but I think it's trying to educate ourselves on this process as well, make sure that we're helping make the right decision. So thanks for being patient with me on that.
My pleasure. A lot of background here, and this was all established before my tenure with the city started, so I had to learn it as well.
Yeah, and my only comment is just, I think we just keep a watchful eye on what we give away, because I think some of these may be, even though it may be challenging either politically or in the community, it may be a great spot, and not to give it up to whatever the underlying zoning is, and hopefully try to push for some of this development, because we need to see one and see how it works, because we have it down. Okay, this time, okay, Councilmember.
I just had a clarification. On the sites that are removed by director prior to annual review, that's because they were developed, and so they can no longer be open to. So it's not like they were removed because we decided not to let them be available. It's just that they were developed, and so
yes,
they're no longer an option.
That's a good point, yes.
Councilman Bessinger, do you have any? Okay. This time we'll open up to the public. Anyone here to speak on this item? Anyone on the web? Okay. We'll bring it back for, is this also a receiving file?
No, it's
action? Okay.
Motion to approve a resolution approving the annual RENA overlay district map for parcels and associated list reflecting the parcels qualified for RENA overlay.
We get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And we'll note that there's one absence for one abstention. Okay. Next, we'll move to city manager comments. John?
Thank you, sir. Today, staff supported the 10th annual Clovis Unified Latino Student Success Conference held at Clovis North. Images are up on the screen for you, and the primary goal is to provide the inspiration for students to pursue their goals beyond high school. Over 500 students participated from all Clovis high schools. 12 city staff members participated, and when I say staff, it's City Clerk Carrie Cha who puts this whole thing together to get the staff together to support. Carrie, anything to expand on that?
This is the second time that we've participated in this event, and Clovis Unified has started to invite us because we do bring a lot of different career opportunities and education background for students. So it's really nice seeing engineers, planners, building inspectors, and our recreation staff as well. Every department has participated in these events, and it's just been such a pleasure to engage with the students. This isn't the only one that we participate in. We also participate in the Asian Student Success Conference that's held at Clovis East in the fall, and then there's also the African American Middle School Student Leadership Conference that is a county-wide event that we just participated in last month as well. So very excited to continue attending these events, and it wouldn't happen without the participation of the staff from all departments.
And I was just going to add, we have a joint subcommittee meeting next week. I think this item's on the agenda for discussion. And one of the challenges that we've had is going to be the gap between communicating with our kids in our high schools, and none of them really think about, I want to go to work for the city. You know, it's not the most exciting thing in the world. And there's significant career opportunities that are available here at the city that many of them don't realize, and a majority of them stumble into it by some internship or something like that.
Well,
anything else?
Yes. Let's not forget that we are also served by Fresno Unified, and whenever we have an opportunity, we should try to put our foot in that door, because there's a fairly large swath of our city in southwest Clovis is Fresno Unified. But this is great.
Okay. No more. We have council comments. We'll start with Councilmember Pierce.
First is a question maybe for Carrie. Are there opportunities when someone makes a public comment to be able to reach out to that person?
For you or for staff to reach out to? For me.
I can address that.
Okay.
It's going to be like if you'd like to reach out to somebody after the council meeting.
Correct.
And we could, assuming it's an email, that would be the easy way to do it. But as far as somebody who comes in and says their name and everything, we may not know who they are.
Right.
But if we can identify them, we will, and we'll provide the information.
So, for example, this evening, the lady had some comments that were not consistent with what I had said, and I would love the opportunity to reach out and make sure that I could fill in the gaps. And that, so if there was an opportunity for that, I don't know if there was any contact information or what we could do to kind of, because obviously in that situation, I'm not supposed to or allowed to really engage and respond, and so I would think that that would be a benefit if there was an opportunity.
And Scott, can you help also educate us on how much we should respond, or is that the direction of the mayor or the person heading the meeting, at that discretion, or
I think typically
what's the best?
I think typically the mayor will ask, are you willing to provide your name and contact information? Oftentimes she'll direct staff to go engage with that person right there. If the mayor doesn't do it, I guess I would say a council member is free to ask.
Okay.
Ma'am, if you're, willing to leave your name and contact information with the city manager or the city clerk, I would love to reach out to you and contact you and leave it at that, I guess, for this evening. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
And I guess I would say, I think the response tonight was appropriate. The Brown Act does limit the response to public comments, but I think an initial, short response to a public comment is certainly allowed under the Brown Act. And then, of course, I think, as all of you know, we can't shut down a speaker. We didn't tonight, obviously. Everyone acted appropriately. You can't shut down a speaker just because they're criticizing, an official or the policies or programs of the city. And I think she did also engage properly. You're really supposed to direct the comments to the body itself, not necessarily attack a member, I guess. So I would say, in listening to the comments, they were directed to the council, obviously directed to you, but directed to the council as well, so.
Thank you for that correction. Anything else?
Well, and then, I did miss last week's meeting, and I, did receive the appropriate instruction that I was to bring souvenirs back for my colleagues, and so I did do that. I will retain the mayor's to give to her next time, but I had a really fantastic trip that was planned and booked long before there was a campaign or an election, but I had a wonderful time. It was great, and I brought you back commemorative souvenirs from the Beach Boys Good Vibrations cruise, and I trust they are going to just skyrocket in value over the years, and so you were on my mind last week, and I'm actually sorry I missed that meeting because it was a humdinger.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Pierce. Councilman Basco?
I'm sorry you missed that meeting as well. It would have been a lot different having 5. No, I'm just kidding. As far as council comments, I don't have anything for tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I just have something quickly. St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and what a lot of people probably don't know is that Ken Curtis, Festus, was a character in a 1952 John Wayne movie called The Quiet Man. He was the director's son and was uncredited in it. And one of the other characters in that movie, I watch this movie every St. Patrick's Day to my wife's chagrin. She doesn't understand. And the other character in the movie was Victor McLaughlin, who won the Academy Award in 1935. He was the Clovis Rodeo Grand Marshal in 1935. He had a ranch on Herndon and McCall area, and he apparently would come into Jim's place to hone his fist fighting skills. I'm going to be decorating the Festus statue with Irish outfits in celebration of St. Patrick's Day. So when you see a kilt on them, don't be surprised. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Bessie. And I don't have anything, but I just wanted to say, Carrie, with regards to the school events, I think you've done an exceptional job. I've gone to them when they first started way back when. My comment is, usually the students contact us when they know us to go. But because they're contacting the city, if you can extend that invitation to the rest of the council, because I think it's always good to have council there, so that way they also know, hey, here's your elected officials or one of us. And so, because they don't invite me to the Latino one because I'm not Latino, but they always invite me to the Asian one. And so, but I think the council should be invited to every one of them because we serve all those students regardless of their background. And so we'd love to be there. But Clovis has such a huge presence that the students come there and just go, there's Clovis. There's 50 tables that are just us. And that's just, I think, encouraging to show the unity that we have with Clovis Unified. So that's all I have. Now we will go into closed session. And do I need to read this? Do I have anything to report?
You can just note that it's there's one item on this evening's agenda for closed session. Staff is not requesting any action, so we don't anticipate a report out.
Okay. All right. We're going to move to closed session. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening.